We will now move on to the third session, India, Japan, and the Indo-Pacific region and strategic dimension. The session will be chaired by Ambassador H.K. Singh, Director General in Delhi Policy Group, and the former Ambassador to Japan. We have three speakers: Professor Yoichiro Sato, Dr. Titli Basu, and Dr. Jojin. Before handing over the floor to Ambassador H.K. Singh, allow me to introduce Ambassador H.K. Singh. Ambassador H.K. Singh served in the Indian Foreign Service from 1974 to 2010 and is a distinguished former career diplomat with extensive experience of geostrategic and geoeconomic issues as well as multilateral institutions which underpins international law and commerce. He has been India's longest serving ambassador to Japan from 2006 to 2010, ambassador to Indonesia from 2003 to 2006, ambassador to Colombia, Ecuador, and Costa Rica, and India's deputy permanent representative to the UN in Geneva. He has held several important assignments during his career, dealing with the United States, West Europe, and the European Union, and India's immediate neighbors. Ambassador Singh has contributed to the forging of India-Japan strategic and global partnership, the intensification of India's relationship with Indonesia and ASEAN, the evolution of India's revitalized Act East policy, and the shaping of India policy towards the neighbors and strategic partners. From 2011 to 2016, Ambassador Singh was a professor of strategic studies at ICRIA. Since 2016, Ambassador H.K. Singh has been the Director General of Delhi Policy Group, which is among India's oldest independent think tanks focused on strategic and international issues of critical national interest. Ambassador H.K. Singh, I request you to kindly conduct the proceedings.
Okay, thank you. I hope everybody can hear me clearly. Please give me a thumbs up if I'm quite clear, right? Sensei, can you hear me? Okay. Sensei, I think your image is distorted, but hopefully you can hear us very clearly. Now, this is the third session of the ICWA's day-long virtual seminar on India-Japan relations at 70, and the session is going to be discussing India-Japan and the Indo-Pacific, the strategic dimensions, actually the strategic and regional dimensions. How are we playing out with that? We have an excellent panel. We have Professor Yoichiro Sato from Ritusumeikan Asia Pacific University in Tokyo. He is also the Dean of the Department of the Graduate School of Asia Pacific Studies. He's taught extensively abroad as well in New Zealand and in the United States, and has authored several works on China, the US-Japan alliance, and geopolitics of the Asia Pacific. Very glad to have you with us, Sensei. So we look forward in a short while to hearing from you. We also have Dr. Titli Basu, Associate Fellow from the MPIDSA. Welcome, Titli. She has worked extensively on East Asia with a special focus on Japan and the Korean Peninsula. She has been a visiting scholar at NIDS Japan as well as the University of Tokyo, and has been author of edited volumes on the Korean Peninsula and the Japan-India-China relationship. We also have Dr. Jojin John, Research Fellow ICWA, who again, like Titli, works on East Asia, focusing on Korea and Japan. He's held visiting research positions in Taipei and in Seoul, and has several publications to his credit. Before we begin, let me take the opportunity as chair to orient some of the thinking of the speakers we will listen to today. First of all, Obviously, we start with what is the Indo-Pacific. So interpretations may differ, national interpretations may differ, but broadly understood meaning of the Indo-Pacific is that it is a geostrategic maritime space straddling both sides and across the confluence of the Indian and Pacific oceans. It encompasses the world's largest populations and markets. It is the world's most economically dynamic and productive region. And it also lies at the heart of global power rebalancing and geopolitical competition. That really is a bit of a handful. So you will be addressing what is an extremely complex subject. India and Japan, as we all know, have established a special strategic and global partnership to pursue cooperation in several areas. What does a special partnership really mean? We will go into that. And how is this being reflected in practice in the Indo-Pacific? That is what we look forward to hearing from you. As strategic partners, our nations have an interest in shaping a stable balance, I would say, in the Indo-Pacific. The goal of this partnership is to provide mutual reinforcement in the security arena and mutually beneficial prosperity through economic ties. So broadly speaking, that's what the two nations have been working on for the last 2 decades. So what do we expect from each other? Let me summarize that as well. India does not look to Japan for external balancing, but Japan can be a very consequential partner for India's economic rise. And so therefore, its main role as far as India is concerned is helping with internal balancing and strengthening of India's rise, and thereby rising to its potential and becoming an even better partner for Japan. Japan, on its part, gains from the vast opportunities for trade and investment offered by India's free market democracy. We are a friendly country. We have got very friendly relations, and I think that is an important element which binds this part of the economic relationship. Japan also stands to gain from secure access to the slots of the Indian Ocean for its energy needs and trade. If you go back many years, even to certain incidents, piracy incidents going back to 1999, it was the realization that there is an Indian Ocean on which Japan depends, and India is vital to the security of that region. That led to Japan's interest in reviving relations with India in 2000. In a geographical sense, India and Japan are Asian bookends of the Indo-Pacific, but with a difference. Japan's interests lie mainly in the maritime construct of East Asia. India's interests encompass both continental Asia and the maritime Indo-Pacific canvas. So it's a bit of a broader approach which India has to take towards its own security needs. Japan and India share common interests in the free and open Indo-Pacific, but here again, their strategic orientation is not quite identical. There are many convergences, but not a perfect identity. Japan's unshakable focus is on the US alliance, while India prizes its strategic autonomy. This is something which both sides have been working to understand, but I hope that the speakers will enlighten us whether both sides have actually understood what this means. Thus, the regional primacy of the US is Japan's preference, while India's vision sees a multipolar Asia free from domination. So we are not talking, in India, we are not talking about a liberal imperium or a pax sinica. Both of them are not part of this multipolar free from domination area. I personally think that this is not really surprising in the historical context, because Japan historically is a former imperial state and India is a post-colonial state. So the orientation of our government since the Second World War ended is bound to be a little bit different. And these nuances which I spoke about just now are visible in our somewhat, more than somewhat divergent views on Ukraine, even though both of us support principles of the UN Charter and a rules-based order under international law. Japan is closely aligned with the West. Some would say it is part of the West, and seemingly regards the security of Europe and the Indo-Pacific as indivisible. India, like most other nations in South and Southeast Asia, perhaps do not see Ukraine as an existential priority for Asia. It is an important issue, but it's fundamentally an issue about European security architecture, not so existential for Asia. I think also there's a belief here in India and in parts of Asia that the concerns which are shown by the West about sovereignty, political independence, and territorial integrity, these must apply to all states, including states in the Indo-Pacific, not just to Ukraine. And what we've seen really in terms of rhetoric, I'm not talking about what goes on behind the scenes in governments, is that countries apparently have a sovereign choice only so long as a nation is supporting Western interests. So Ukraine has a sovereign choice, Finland and Sweden have sovereign choices, but the rest of the world must bandwagon with the West, irrespective of their own interests. So these are really issues which are coming to the fore now, and I thought it was important to highlight them. We want to keep the focus of the India-Japan relationship firmly on Asia. And Asia has been facing authoritarian China's military assertions, economic coercion, and violations of rules-based order for a decade now, at least a decade. I remember very much, and I think Sensei you will remember that boat incident of Okinawa in 2010, it was, I think, when a Japanese fishing boat, a Chinese fishing boat was taken, was arrested, put under arrest by the Coast Guard of Japan, and all kinds of mayhem broke out in terms of sanctions against Japan by China, and so on and so forth. So we've been facing this for a long time. India has been warning about it for a decade, and it has also been warning about the strategic import and intent behind the Belt and Road Initiative. We don't know to what extent these concerns have been shared, including by Japan. On the defense side, let me be very frank, there are modest expectations of cooperation on defense and security. However, it is positive, and I'm really reassured that understanding of each other's neighborhood security concerns has grown. And these were not 4 or 5 years ago. They were very, let's say, low-level understandings. Now we understand better what Japan's concerns are in its immediate neighborhood, and I think Japan very clearly also understands what India's concerns in its South Asian neighborhood. There is also undoubtedly incremental progress on defense ties, which is ongoing. To my mind, what should be of concern to us as Indo-Pacific partners is that the promise of our economic relations is falling short. Bilateral trade is actually very meager. It's hovered around $15 billion from the time when I was in Japan, actually, which is 11 years ago. The ranking of Japan in India's external trade profile has dropped from among the leading partners in 2000 to the 23rd partner for India's exports and the 12th for imports. So you can see that this is declining. Among all major Asian economies, the volume of India-Japan trade is the lowest, and the share of India in Japan's FDI is equally the lowest among all major regional economies. So this is an area which, as I said, we look to Japan for internal balancing, for enabling India's rise, and this element is really slipping a little bit. Now, again, we have a little bit of a gap on regional trade issues. Japan is a leading member of the China-centric RCEP. India, for both strategic and economic reasons, has opted to stay out. Broadly, if I read from the literature, the perspectives on regional integration through trade are becoming increasingly difficult to reconcile, given China's massive trade interdependence with China, Japan's massive trade interdependence with China. So it finally brings me to the Quad. And Quad, I think, it has a very important role in regional soft balancing and the promotion of a rules-based free and open Indo-Pacific. We are greatly looking forward to the Quad summit hosted by Japan on May 24. In the Quad, India has sought to maintain the focus on challenges in the Indo-Pacific and not divert attention to Europe. We strongly believe that the future of global order is primarily at stake here in Asia. The parameters of India's Indo-Pacific convergences with the Quad, 3 other Quad members are allies, are gradually being better understood and better established. And I think that was evident on, what was it, March 11, when they met virtually, and maybe it will be again evident when they meet on the 24th. So my overall view, as you discuss this subject of our convergence in the Indo-Pacific, is that the trajectory of India-Japan strategic coordination in the Indo-Pacific will most likely mirror continuing progress in India-US ties, which are increasingly bound by a common interest in sustaining a favorable balance of power in the Indo-Pacific. So I'm quoting directly from the outcomes of the India-US summit on April 10th, and this is a fundamental benchmark which is being established gradually, which hopefully will feed into our relationship with Japan. I must conclude on a very positive note. India has for a long time encouraged Japan to play a more dynamic role in Asia's strategic balance as a multidimensional power. Japan has in the recent past taken important decisions to increase defense spending and step up defense capability. We welcome that. India is similarly focusing on enhancing hard power capability. These parallel pursuits will, to my mind, make a very meaningful contribution to the stability of the Indo-Pacific. This is all the more so as the lessons from both Europe and Asia are that there is a tendency among great powers to use unrestrained power to achieve unilateral objectives. So the example of power matters much more than the power of example today. And especially at a juncture when intense geopolitical competition is here to stay with us. I'll conclude with a short quote from a European statesman. And the quote says, "Nothing is so weak and unsustainable as a reputation for power which is not based on one's own strength." So I think we are going about it in the right way. We are both wanting to strengthen ourselves and thereafter collaborate on our convergences to secure a stable, free, and open Indo-Pacific. I conclude my remarks there, and I would like to invite Professor Yoichiro Sato. Sensei, you have the floor. Please let us have your thoughts.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to this very prestigious forum. Speaking of the relationship between India and Japan and its implications for global power realignment, I posed this question in the title: is it a wedge or is it a glue? And I'd like to speak from both perspectives without necessarily pressing forward my particular personal view. And I think the starting point of such a discussion is rather conventional and not very interesting. Everybody has spoken of rise of China and concurrently a relative decline of the United States in the global power politics. But I have been adding to those two presumptions that perhaps what we are going to have, especially in the long-term future, if not the most immediate future, is a multipolarization of the global politics. So starting from there, I have been thinking of one short-term scenario and also two slightly differing long-term scenarios. So let me speak first of the short-term scenario, having in mind the time frame of somewhere between 2028, 2033, that's like about 5 years to 10 years from now. And okay, my math is bad, it's 6 and 11, but anyway. The kind of scenario I'm looking at is that the world will have two poles, but the global system is not necessarily a bipolar system. So in other words, the US and China will be strong powers, stronger than any other potential competition, but they're not strong enough to establish two closely separated, two tightly held the groups which rival each other. So two powers are very strong, but not strong enough to create a bipolar system like the world was during the Cold War. So in that kind of scenario, what we will likely see is that the current growth of China, which already seems to be slowing down, will peak very soon. And China will enter a low growth period. There are a lot of uncertainties about such kind of forecast, especially, the China managed COVID quite successfully in the beginning. Well, not the very beginning, but within a year. But then it seems the COVID has returned to China, and China is going through lockdown of cities and so forth. At the time, North America and Europe and Japan are recovering from it. So there are some uncertainties about China's future. But the slowing down of China is also accompanied by some forecast that the US may actually retake the #1 position in the near future and stay there for some time. So, but the US return to the pinnacle is not for a long term if you look at the long-term forecast. So at some point, the system will look more like a multipolar system. But in any case, what's clear in this is that both Japan and the European Union will lose their relative positioning in the world and become actors of lesser influence. And it's also pretty clear that Russia has really shot itself in the foot with its adventure in Ukraine. And in the short term, Russian failure will keep it from joining the club of multipolar league. But having said that, I think in the long term, we should look at mainly two possibilities, if not more. And one possibility is that the world system will consist of 5 major powers, that the US, China, European Union, Russia, and India. I'm looking at the time frame of about 2050. By then, Indian economy will come close to the Chinese economy in size and competing for the top slot. And US quite likely receding to number 3 position in the world. And if Russia recovers, Russia will be there. And EU collectively, if not individually, will be somewhere around that rank of number 3, number 4 positions in the world economy. So India will ascend on a steady path under this scenario, and Russia will overcome its short-term difficulty and remain one of the major powers. The other scenario assumes decline of European Union and possibly a disintegration. So if Europe disintegrate and becomes just a bunch of individual states with aging population, then EU cannot be counted as a collective actor. So in this scenario, there will be only 4 major power poles: US, China, Russia, and India. So the long-term projections slightly differ depending on the EU cohesion. In any case, let's shift back to our attention onto Japan and India. Japan is not going to be a great power in either of the scenario. And this, despite the kind of security policy reform Japan went under Prime Minister Abe, and the kind of more proactive security policy during Abe's successors' governments. Sure, Japan can do a lot more than it is doing. Japan's still only spending 1% of the GDP on defense, and there's a discussion in the ruling party to bring it to 2%. That's doubling the current defense budget. That will bring Japan on a par with most willing European Union countries, most willing NATO members. And I think Germany grudgingly is going to get there, and France also increasing budget to 2%. Those things are likely happening, and maybe Japan will get to that level too. There's a discussion about the obtaining ground attack capability, counter attack capability against the hostile states. And those things are happening. But in a long-term projection, because Japan's GDP is not expected to grow fast and its relative economic positioning will decline, by some forecasts, Japan will be something like number 8 economy in the world by the year 2050. So its position will significantly drop. But for good or bad, Japan's location gives itself some geopolitical significance. And if this significance did not fundamentally change from Japan's opening to the world in 1854, when the Commodore Perry forced Japan to open, until now, then it's pretty safe to assume that this significance will remain for next 25 years or so. But perhaps in some reduced significance because of some game changer technology. I'm specifically thinking of the space-based technology, which might fundamentally alter the role of the Navy and surface ships, especially. So those things can alter the geopolitical significance of Japan, but I think there will be some significance left. And Japan has been a very active promoter of free trade, as speakers on the previous panel pointed out. And Japan's role in keeping the global free trade has been very important, the kind of leadership Japan played. And Japan will try, but it has no power to unilaterally do that. It has the power of contributing such ideas, kind of intellectual leadership to play. But in terms of economic size, which gives a state a kind of hegemonic role in enforcing liberal trade as a global order, Japan is no longer having such a power. Japan is transforming itself into a investment power, like the earlier developed European states like UK, France, or the United States, which is a global investment power. Japan makes more revenues on investment than earning a surplus through international trade. So the nature of the economy has changed. Whereas India is going to be a great regional power in the Indian Ocean region, and its geopolitical role in this region will grow as India modernizes its navy and acquire more naval assets. And I think that will slowly alter the balance of power, not so much between China and India, but I think between the United States and India. The US commitment in the Indian Ocean region is going to decline in a relative term vis-a-vis India. And it is let me stop this alarm. Okay, sorry, that was my 15 minutes reminder. Anyway, so the US role is not going to be the one of leadership in this region, and it has to be either a collective leadership inclusive of the United States or more of a chaotic rivalry among different naval powers, including US, India, and China, and in some reduced capability, some others like Japan and European Union, and possibly Russia as well. So what does India-Japan relations mean in this kind of forecasted scenario? I think proactively, both countries have a strong stake in bilateral cooperation between Japan and India, which would maximize their collective weight under any of those scenarios. Whether US and Japan get along, whether US and China get along or don't get along, India and Japan cooperating will raise their collective voice under any of these scenarios. I think the RCEP, when India was a part of the negotiation, it was very much Japan's hope that the weight of the RCEP would work in favor of Japan's standing within TPP vis-a-vis the United States. The two trade negotiations were concurrently held so that Japan get the best deal out of both. Didn't quite work like that, and the US left, and now Japan is left with TPP without the United States, and now with application for membership by Taiwan and China. That's really an awkward situation, and RCEP without India. So hopefully India will open up its economy and liberalize its economy and kind of return to this free trade talks in a strategic realignment. The Quad framework, its future is uncertain, and I think ongoing crisis in Ukraine revealed some of the potential limits to the Quad growth. But I think Kishida visited India back in March, and I think Kishida's diplomacy was really aimed at serving as a glue between India and Japan's the other allies and friends. And although India has to pay attention, great attention to its bilateral relations with India, and the arms supply from Russia, and the many other considerations. But I think it was still meaningful that Japan paid the great respect to India's national interest, and this I think the discussion's results were reflected very much in the phrasing of the Quad statement, which came out later. Actually, not Quad statement, the India-Japan bilateral joint statement, which came out after the meeting. They briefly mentioned Ukraine, but quickly moved on to discussing keeping stability in Asia, and primarily implying the China as the main concerns of the region. So the other thing we need to keep eyes on is whether Japan is going to seek a membership in AUKUS. The most recent news was an intentional leak on the Sankei newspaper. So I would see it as a sort of a ad balloon kind of leak. Somebody in the Japanese government who's a proponent of Japan's membership into AUKUS is testing the water through intentional leaks. So that's what I see in the current development. And if that case, what does the future for the Quad holds and India's place in it? So those are something to watch. And finally, I think depends on whether EU can act as a collective actor in its own home ground as well as in the Indo-Pacific, or only individual European states can have some roles in the Indo-Pacific, is holding some implications for both the partnerships with India and with Japan as well. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. It was a very magisterial presentation because it covered a lot of ground, a lot of scenarios. Yes, it went far beyond the time, but that doesn't matter. We value your participation with us today. Let's move on to the other speakers now. And Dr. Titli Basu, you have the floor. Let's hear what you have to say.
Thank you, sir. Am I audible? Okay, great. So let me begin by thanking ICWA for the invitation and making me a part of the conversation today. And I also want to thank both Ambassador H.K. Singh for laying out that excellent exposition, setting the background, laying all the cards on the table, which really hits the nail. And of course, always a pleasure to listen to Sato Sensei. Or the scenario building part was interesting. I was thinking in the 5 countries where Japan is featuring, then anyway, it's good to understand some of the scenarios that are emerging. So coming to my, some talking points today. Obviously, the larger context of Indo-Pacific has been set, so I will not go into that. What I intend to do in the next couple of minutes is basically lay out as we go from here. And certainly there are some major issues in terms of progress in the economic sector. And in the previous section also we heard that. So some of the areas where we really need to work on in the next couple of decades and try to leverage our partnership with Japan. So I'll try to reflect on them. So at a time when, there is a fluid balance of power, order, values, define the post-pandemic world, I think in India and Japan both has consequential role to play. And scanning the state of play in the 70th anniversary of our diplomatic relations, I think I'll pick up from Chair's positive note and just say that I would argue that India-Japan Indo-Pacific vision of 2025, it has yielded some positive and rich dividends, but also demonstrated adjusted and demonstrated our strategic maturity in terms of adapting to the post-pandemic complexities. Now, way back in 2015, since it's an informed audience, I will not go back. to that. I think in 2015, long before free and open Indo-Pacific became, it got the political lexicon, and resurrection of Quad in 2017, let alone the geopolitical shocks of the pandemic. I think it was the strategic foresight of our policy elites and the political class, both in Tokyo and in Delhi, which culminated into this Vision 2025. And the objective was pretty simple. It was to engineer an action-oriented partnership by synergizing, collective capacities, and kind of bring out or chart a collaborative Indo-Pacific agenda. Post-pandemic, we do see, we coming together along with our other Indo-Pacific, like-minded partners on issue-based, alignments. And we have incubated some ideas. We are seeing them in a very nascent stage right now, whether it is the Quad vaccine partnership or the resilient supply chain initiative with that we have drawn up with the Australians and the Japanese. So despite the nuance gaps on some verticals, and rightly so pointed out in the remarks earlier, whether it is our approach to the Indo-Pacific economic architecture in terms vis-a-vis mega FTAs, or also our principal position on Ukraine, which has really brought to the fore the divergences between the two between the two nations. But I think India and Japan partnership is an important one between national interest and international responsibilities. As we go ahead from here, I think the aim for us should be to lead confidently in shaping some solutions, strategic solutions in the post-pandemic world order, especially when international power structures are getting reorganized. So today, as I mentioned, I intend to reflect on 3 points. These are not exhaustive. There are a wide bouquet of issues that we can work on, and we have heard some in the morning, and we will be hearing throughout the day. But I just picked these themes based on the current developments that are unfolding right now in Japan. First thing I would like to flag here is the aspect of economic security. Now, I think even before the pandemic struck, I think there were in the power corridors of Indo-Pacific capitals, we have seen policymakers are focusing more and more on the economy and security nexus, especially in the context of post-COVID recovery. So the primary question is essentially how to balance, the trust and transparency in the in supply chain risk management with the the economic rationale of efficiency, cost competitiveness, and market. So Japan, as the third largest economy, has in this area has emerged as a front runner in driving the conversation on economic security. From we have seen that they have set up the first ever ministerial post for economic security with Kobayashi-san as the minister. Earlier this month, I think economic security law came in. So the strategic thinking on this issue is manifesting, and de-risking of supply chain remains at the heart of this debate in Tokyo. So if we look at one of the 4 pillars of this law, economic security law, which unfolded, it also talks, one of the pillars is about supply chain resilience. So but if we step back a little bit, I think reorienting this economic security strategy is not sudden. I think the discussion started during the tenure of former Prime Minister Abe Shinzo. And the objective is, partly in sync with the global conversations that we were seeing in various, Indo-Pacific nations, whether it is about securing cutting-edge technologies or strengthening foreign investment regulation in core sectors, or even stepping up, the self-sufficiency in strategic metals and minerals. And also better strategizing developmental aid in Indo-Pacific. So for Japan, I think COVID-led growth, global supply chain disruption brought to the fore already existing debate which has erupted from time to time on decoupling versus reshoring and risk management. So we are well aware that Japan is one of the countries which allocated subsidies, I think, to the tune of 2.2 billion to shift some of the production out of China and essentially reshoring back to Japan for high value added products, essentially to push the Japanese small, medium, and micro enterprises and pushing regional economic development. So And we have seen, if we look at the data, the first set of projects and companies which got the subsidy, essentially, I think out of 88 or 90, most of it went back to Japan, and I think around odd 30 went to Southeast Asia. And we have seen two companies, reaching out to India in terms of diversification. But the truth be told, I think complete disentanglement of deeply embedded supply chains, which advances niche manufacturing and intense trade and investment networks, which are built over decade, is highly unlikely in the medium term. So securing critical supply chains within a China plus one model is looked at in the short to medium terms. And so far, we have seen intricate value chains and production networks are cultivated, prioritizing economic rationale, as I was mentioning, and not so much on geopolitics of it. But I think the pandemic was a wake-up call for all of us. And of course, now the conversation is more on trust, on resilience, and so on and so forth. I think most of the countries individually and along with some of the trusted partners are discussing intricate supply chain structures. They are trying to, map the vulnerabilities, the knowledge gaps, what are the policy choices we have, how we can boost international cooperations, or some in terms of re-engineering supply chains in the long term. So it's kind of a brainstorming on making supply chains more resilient without losing the competitiveness. Now, in this frame, I think Japan, Australia, and India has launched the resilient supply chain initiatives. But again, if we look at a realistic look, take a realistic look in mapping the knowledge gaps in supply chain structure is fine. But for India, I think it's a steep learning curve as we are trying to, step up and plug into the global manufacturing ecosystem. We have seen several constructive steps coming up, which we believe will add to our competitiveness. For example, production links incentives are given in some of the important sectors. Also, we all are aware that Japan has, panned out some success stories in Make in India, under the Make in India campaign or initiative. For example, the Suzuki Toshiba Densho joint venture on lithium-ion batteries, or the Suzuki Boleno for export. But if we look at the larger trend, the Japanese companies, I mean, in the previous discussion, in the previous session, we have heard about all the JEBIC and the JETRO projections and estimates and expectations, but still there is a continued tilt towards Southeast Asia. And I think it's when it comes to, if we look at the data on subsidy supported diversification that happened after COVID. And I think this is where we really need to work together in the next 2 or 3 probably decades. And in the, most of, I think it's not difficult to understand why Southeast Asia is kind of an obvious choice. Because through Japanese presence, trade and investment, thick networks of value chains and production networks that they have built over decades, they're more familiar with the Southeast Asian ecosystem, which is already integrated into their economy. So I think we need to work a little more on this, and there may be, good dividends from this. Also, I think recently some encouraging developments. I think last month we have seen that Japanese government has approved 8 projects, out of which 6 are in India and 2 are in Australia under the program for supply chain resilience in the Indo-Pacific region. So these projects will be implemented by March 2003. And the idea behind funding these projects are initially to conduct a demonstration program to help Japanese companies visualize their supply chains, upgrade logistics, diversify their production bases. So some of the larger challenges that we are facing in terms of manufacturing at our end, of course, again, it has a history. So quick fixes are not available. Things can't change overnight. But I think we have made progress, and we are it is a work in progress, and we have to be a little more aggressive, and when we are looking for these, leveraging these kind of supply chain initiatives. I think even not just the India, Japan, Australia one, there are many, even the Quad has a supply chain group, and now I think even the Indo-Pacific economic framework that US is supposed to launch, again there are supply chain verticals. So I think we really need to step up and kind of accelerate the pace of our own participation in these initiatives. Coming to the second point, I will is my slide moving?
Yeah, it's not been moving, Titli, it's not been moving, but we've been following you very carefully.
Okay. I wanted to show a map actually.
Can you finish in 3 minutes, please? Because
Sure.
Jojin won't have any time left for
Right.
his presentation. Yeah,
so I'll quickly come to another area where we have made, I think bilaterally within India, we have made considerable progress. But I think, in the larger regional framework, there is a lot we can do. And I'll just flag that in this audience, everybody would probably agree that Japan is unmatched in the game of quality infrastructure. And it is also centrally positioned in all the global initiatives, whether it is BW3 partnerships or the Blue Dot Network. So essentially, the idea is about connecting the economic growth pools and market linkages. And it is also about creating strategic leverages in the Great Power Game. So Japan also has been a norm setter in quality infrastructure. We have seen in the Ise-Shima principles and G20 principles. So I'll not go into that. But openness and transparency, both responsible debt sustainability, financing, these are something which drives Japan. So the point here I would like to make is that of course, infrastructure export is a very integral component of Japanese both development, if you look at the development charter, on also the economic strategy. And it has been, a force multiplier in, as I mentioned, within the bilateral setup, and not just mega infrastructure projects, but also in the strategic peripheries, both in Northeast and also in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So I think the latest economic survey mentions that if we want to pursue a $5 trillion GDP, we need to invest around, I think, around 1.4 trillion over the years. So that creates, that actually tells you the kind of financing that we need. So doing it alone is just, it's not an option. So Japan here is again a trusted partner. But again, I would say that while we do these kind of infrastructure projects, I think we have to consciously keep in mind the larger regional picture in mind, because in the Northeast, we have seen various projects coming up supported by JICA and which are very welcome, but we can leverage this project and connect to Southeast Asia and further East Asia, whether if we cleverly leverage some of the regional infrastructure projects which are in place. For example, there is an Asian Highway and SASEC projects in ADB, and also our own trilateral highway and the Kaladan multimodal projects and so on and so forth.
Can you finish now, please? Because we are already at 1 o'clock. We've got just 15 minutes left.
Right. So I think the third point I would like to make quickly is about this regional security part. Again, a lot of discussion has happened about our orientations and the previous discussion also. So 2-3 things I would like to make here, points I would like to make. If you look at the conversation in Japan, they are, of course, we are preoccupied with what is happening in the European theater, but also in they are revising the national security strategy. The defense white paper is due. So I think on the maritime SLOCs part that you've mentioned, the geography, the strategic geography of India in the Indian Ocean, and also the larger role of Indian Navy in terms of SLOCs is something which we are positive about. Second is, I think going forward, we also need to take this bilateral security cooperation to a more trilateral framework, particularly pursuing European partners like France, UK, and Germany. And so I'll finish by saying that while we have seen layers of defense dialogues laid out at all levels, but I think one area where we really need to work is defense technology cooperation. Despite various agreements put in place and industry forum in place, but I don't, and ATLA and DRDO doing projects on robotics and unmanned ground vehicles. But I think this is one area which needs a lot of handholding as we go ahead with this partnership. So I'll just stop here.
Thank you very much, Titli. Very comprehensive. Dr. Jojin John, please start, because I'm really afraid of losing more time. Go ahead, please. You have the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your kind introduction. I have to admit that this paper is still a working progress completion, so I am really looking forward to the suggestions and the comments from the other panelists as well as from the audience. Given the fact that much of the Indo-Pacific aspect has been covered by the previous speakers and the previous sessions, it will help me to skip some of my contextualizing part of my presentation. So I'll try to be very brief. I'll try to finish in about 10 minutes or so. This is the broad the organization of my presentation. I'll briefly introduce, briefly contextualize India-Japan relations in the Indo-Pacific. Second, I move on to look at some aspects of what one would call as a new instrument or a framework, which is the India-Japan in third country partnership. Where I highlight some of the developments so far. Then I will, for furthering discussions on this particular aspects, I would like to highlight two potential cases for cooperation, which is one is the country specific, which one could also think about in terms of say India-Japan third country or sort of a trilateral, and the other is a structural sectoral specific. So let me. It has been mentioned that the last two decades has witnessed a significant, substantial development in India-Japan relations starting from 2000. This has been reflected in the periodic upgradation of the power relations, global partnership in 2000, strategic and global partnership in 2006, and special strategic and global partnership in 2014. Key features which the previous speakers have alluded to is the broadening and the deepening of the relationship. It has genuinely became strategic, and the previous speakers have all alluded to the key driver of the relationship, which is, I think this has been structured basically the rise of China factor, the emergence of India, a whole lot of structural changes that are seeing in the Indo-Pacific and the global level is the key driver of the relationship. On the Indo-Pacific, but while the rise of China has been the key driver of the relationship between the two countries, for India, the implications of the rise in China and its assertiveness has been on the maritime as well as on the continental part of aspects of India's strategic and security outlook. However, in the maritime domain dominates in the shared space of Indian and Japanese strategic thinking, and has been the key driver of India-Japan relations of late. sharing similar worldviews on international order and values, the strong historical linkage. India-Japan, even without a shared threat perception, is qualified to become national partner. However, the shared concern about the Pacific China, however, have opened the envelope of national strategic partnership between the two countries. And but the contribution of Prime Minister Abe in terms of conceptualizing and putting out the conception of Indo-Pacific has already been mentioned. And it is also interesting to note that the Indo-Pacific vision was first articulated in the India-Japan bilateral statement in 2015, even before it featured in the Indian and Japanese foreign policy visions. As mentioned earlier, under the broad framework of the Indo-Pacific, India and Japan have been working increasingly on the mini-lateral, multilateral front, closer partnership between the two countries. In ASEAN, institutions have been geared in recent years to strengthen the ASEAN centrality in the Indo-Pacific. The two countries have also been working closely with like-minded partners through trilateral and multilateral forums and other issue-based violations, the most significant one being one already mentioned, and also the other trilaterals, India, Japan, US, India, Japan, Australia, India, Japan, also there's been talk about India, Japan, France, India, Japan, Italy. So many of these are the new aspects of the broader regional and the global aspects of the India-Japan relations. Along with the strengthening of the bilateral and multilateral cooperation between the two countries, recently there has been the emergence of what one called a new format or new instrument of partnership, which is India-Japan partnership in third country. The initiative was first announced officially during the summit meeting between Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Abe in 2017, focusing projects in Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Myanmar, and Africa. But the third country cooperation framework, the framework is a new trend in international relations, with most of the major countries has been adopting the framework of late. Well, for instance, China since 2015 has been pushing this framework of third country partnership. In the Chinese case, it's more articulated as third market, which is to focus on the emphasis on joint economic projects. France in 2015, Japan, for that matter, in 2018, has been a notable development in the Chinese context. In the context of India and Japan, the initiative has been the reflection of high level of trust and comfort in working together. It also indicates a shared emphasis on stepping up their joint rationale in other words, articulation of what one would think about as leadership to partnership framework. Let me spend a little time on to understand what this framework is all about before getting into the details of India, Japan partnership in third countries. But the third country partnership can take shape in multiple areas, including security, defense, development partnership, infrastructure, connectivity, joint economic projects involving two states in a third country on the basis of mutual consultation. It also involves the private enterprises working in relation with the government agencies. Looking at its advantages, the pooling of resources is a major incentive of this particular framework. But this resource has been a major challenge for Japan and India individually in the Indo-Pacific. If one were to compare with China, so it's one way of dealing with the resource issue. The other aspect, the two countries bring a different strength in relationship to this partnership. Japan's profile as a a leading economic actor through its investments, ODA, throughout the Indo-Pacific region, and complements India's growing profile as a rising economy and developmental partner, and a strong historical and social linkages with the countries in the Indo-Pacific. But it also helps to overcome the different domestic and foreign policy and image limitations when engaging with a regional other regional partners. There are, one can cite multiple examples. There is a perception that the anxiety of the dominance of India, particularly among its neighborhood, can be alleviated to some extent by bringing Japan into the partnership aspect, and also, but the recent events in last year. The events in Myanmar has also reduced significant engagement of significantly the Japanese engagement in Myanmar, but India has continued to focus on its engagement, which in a way helps to keep helps to overcome these kinds of situations and limitations. Well, it will also helps to avoid duplication, help to learn from each other's best practices, and avoid unnecessary competitions. Despite the considerable benefits, there are several changes existing in this format, particularly the amount of time and the coordination and planning effort that needs to require with such an effort, and also differences in their respective approaches, particularly if you look at business cultures and also the governmental partnership approaches. There is also expected pushback from regional countries as they prefer these countries bilaterally to take advantage of the competition. But in the India-Japan context, the emphasis on the third country partnership has been on the areas of capacity building, development cooperation, connectivity and infrastructure, and also on joint economic projects. Let me highlight some of the developments in this area. Well, South Asia has been primary target of India-Japan third country partnership for obvious reasons. The first project that was announced in this format was in Sri Lanka in 2017, well, about building an LNG terminal in Sri Lanka sorry if I not pronouncing it correctly, but Kerawal Pitia LNG terminal in Sri Lanka. In this regard, in 2018, an Indian energy company, Petronet, partnered with the Japanese investor, Mitsubishi, and Jojin, and the Sri Lankan local partners to build a terminal with a capacity of 2.6 mega ton per annum. The project has further received Asian Development Bank funding in 2019. The project was supposed to begin in 2021, but still it's still under the yet to begin. The second project which has received much of the media attention is the Colombo port project, which India and Japan, along with its Sri Lankan partner, signed an MOU, which was later cancelled by the Sri Lankan government after political change. In Bangladesh, Japan's Marubeni Corporation and India's Larsen and Toubro collaborated in building a 400 megawatt BPM3 gas-based combined power project. And also, these two companies won a project to build a Dhaka Metro Rail project. And this is the India-Japan first rail project in a third country. and there are two other projects that India and Japan are working together in Bangladesh.
Jojin, we are out of time now, and I have to give everybody an opportunity to say a few words to wind up their thoughts. Can you just finish in one in half a minute, please? Then I can ask everybody to I'll pose a few questions and let everybody speak one by one.
Sure. And there are similar projects in Myanmar, and also there has been a discussion about the cooperation in Africa, and also in the Russian Far East and the Pacific Island countries. Let me flag two cases for potential cooperation, which is India-Japan cooperation in Vietnam. India-Japan joint partnership in third country, or trilateral format, with focusing on the issues of connectivity and maritime security. And on the, let me also submit this potential project of in this format in the broader aspects in the sector where India and Japan have been working closely and also working very actively in the last few years, which is in the areas of maritime infrastructure development in the Indian Ocean region, particularly focusing on Sri Lanka, Kenya, Bangladesh, and also Iran, particularly on Chabahar. In the interest of time, and I would like to conclude by saying that in this, though the bilateral partnership in that country is still in the exploratory stage, but it's a potential instrument not only to enhance the respective footprints within the region, but also helps to achieve Indian and Japanese goal of establishing stability, security, and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we've had three excellent presentations, and thank you very much, presenters. It's been wonderful to hear your thoughts. I would like to give everybody an opportunity to wind up and say something in concluding remarks. I have to be very circumspect in the number of questions which I really wanted to ask everybody, but for Professor Sato, can I just say that that your scenarios, you have built them very carefully. Obviously, these are model scenarios, but in terms of your conclusion, which was somewhat sort of India and Japan drifting away into autonomous spheres, because you said that Ukraine shows the limits of the Quad, and Japan might join AUKUS, so Quad would become redundant. So India's role in any such thing would become an open question. The implication of that seems to be that you are imagining the Indo-Pacific once again becoming the Asia-Pacific, and the Indian Ocean region, which is why it is now called the Indo-Pacific, floating off into another sphere. Now, you know that there is already a security and strategic stalemate and a standoff in East Asia, because the powers of the allies and the powers of China are in total standoff. China's opportunities lie in the Indian Ocean. Its breakout strategies lie to come out of the South China Sea through Malacca and into the Indian Ocean. Now, is Japan looking at this as purely India's responsibility, and Japan's own energy and trading interests really don't come into play in terms of slots of the Indian Ocean? I would put to you that the very reason that the United States continues to engage India in a very strategic way is that without India and the United States working together, the balancing of the Indo-Pacific is not complete. China then has two disaggregated fronts to take care of. One, it is already taken care of, which is in East Asia. The second one is India. And if the two of them are not together, it does not have a two-front challenge. I just like to ask your views on that in your concluding remark. And there was a question from somebody who's asked you, is there a real, I mean, what do you see as the relevance and potential of India and Japan working together to build a multipolar Asia? So that is for you. The question for Titli, I would like to just point out to both Titli and John that it is very true that we should be building on third country projects, and we should be, of course, leveraging Japan's excellence in terms of our own infrastructure. But we are running into problems in both areas. In terms of JICA and ODA loans, etc., we have the issue of there are two issues there. Firstly, Japan's quality infrastructure, when openly bid, is non-competitive. Japanese companies cannot win contracts on openly bid basis. That is why ODA comes in, and then India is facing in various metro projects increasing numbers of problems on moving those forward, because the ODA loans all come with very onerous conditionalities, and those conditionalities relate to sourcing of technology and products and expertise from Japan, and limiting competition from other European or other parties who might be interested in bidding. This is currently going on in the Chennai metro because it's an ongoing thing. And the other issue for Jojin is that, yes, we have been talking for 4 or 5 years regarding third country projects. And at the end of the day, nobody would be happier than me if we really start making some concerted progress. But frankly, this is a reflection on the degree of strategic and diplomatic coordination which actually goes on between us in the capitals of these countries where we're talking about these projects. And my impression is that we didn't do too terribly well in Sri Lanka when we lost the Eastern term. So is that coordination actually taking place? So that's an essential issue which comes into play. Anyway, please go ahead and make your concluding remarks, because we are well past time. We are 6.5 minutes past actual time. But Professor, you have a minute and a half to conclude.
Okay.
Then Titli and then John.
Okay. Thank you very much for great questions. And I'd like to wrap my answers to 2 questions into one. And I didn't mean at all that Japan should choose AUKUS over Quad. My personal view is that India must be included in this security partnerships in this region, and that should be a kind of insurance against China, becoming truly hegemonic and assertive. I think there's still a chance to engage China and keep its behavior in check. But as an insurance, I think the partnership inclusive of India is absolutely necessary. And I remember this old quote I found from some works, and the Australian diplomat making fun of India by saying, India is a potential, and so it will be. And this was a very cynical view about India's role in the Indo-Pacific security. And I think the engaging India is very important. So in that sense, Japan serving as a glue between India and the other Quad partners, and also some European partners like UK, is very important. With France, India has no problem, going bilaterally engaging France and also trilaterally working with France and Australia and so forth. But I think UK-India relationship probably is served better if Japan sometimes attend as a kind of a intermediary actor. And so, and this shows also in the trade relationship as well. And, you know, India's expectation on India was great, but the withdrawal from RCEP really disappointed Japan. And partly because India's membership in RCEP would boost ASEAN effort to diversify economic partnerships away from China, and this is of Japan's interest. So Japan was counting on India to some degree in that dimension, but you know, if India cannot keep up with expectations all the time, you know, that will push Japan more toward AUKUS. And I think the challenge is on both sides, on Japan and also on India as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that very candid assessment, because I do think that strategic partners like the two of us should not take each other for granted, and we must be able to meet some expectations in order to move forward. But I do see that we are entering a certain phase, maybe a slightly more nuanced and more, let's say, underplayed downward phase of our relationship. Hopefully that will not really transpire. Hopefully the trajectory will be kept up. You're right about UK, because well, UK is the former colonial power. Now, as I said earlier, we are post-colonial states, most of us, India and a lot of countries in Southeast Asia. So we may not feel the same way about Europe and the UK as Japan does. And I personally would like to suggest to you that it's good that the Europeans have started to take an interest in the Indo-Pacific. It's good that they are coming forward. For far too long, they have acted as if China is the only country in which they have interest in, and that interest is commercial. So if they are going to be coming forward, we'd like to see what they will be able to bring to the table. And I, frankly, this decision about not AUKUS, the Quad and the relevance of Quad, etc., it will all depend on the nature of the relationship between India and the United States. That's going to be the ultimate glue for any progress of the Quad, not the other relationships within the Quad. So let's see what happens in coming months and weeks. Titli, please go ahead. What do you think about this? The political infrastructure is there, but it's not competitive.
Yes, I agree kind of with your assessment and comments. It is the ability to withstand competition. I think it's not just in yeah, so I was mentioning that it's a larger issue, sir. I feel that you may remember that in Indonesia's high-speed railway case, when competition came into play, actually Japanese high-speed railway technology couldn't withstand the competition from the Chinese. So it's a larger trend, and it is at the Japanese end, I think, which probably, you know, they have to work a little bit more on how to be more competitive. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, please, there's a lot of work to be done in this, because there are some conditionalities which have been improved, but if we are going to go forward and continue with ODA linked infrastructure development, and lots of things will need to change, because otherwise that relevance will also be going down.
Right. And on some particular flagship projects, of course, we have seen some detailed study about the economic rationale also. I mentioned the high-speed railway project, the study that came from, IIM about how to make it more economically viable. So we have to, when it comes to economic considerations, yes, this is a very valid point about how to make it more competitive and how to make it more, the ability to withstand competition, as I mentioned earlier, is something that I think maybe the Japanese side had to work a little bit more, because I think if we open it up, India is an emerging market, and with the market potential, I think we will see a lot of, other interested stakeholders coming in and joining and probably taking it away. So that is something that I completely agree with you. Things need to change, considerably for this pattern to continue.
So you have to. So you're on mute.
I think it's getting muted from your end, because I also got muted in between.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead, Jojin.
Well, I agree with your question about there is very limited progress in terms of partnership that we have had a lot of if you look back way much more, particularly the progression nobody seems to be talking about it. We have to be more in terms of we talk and what we do. That aspect is there, and also the coordinating aspect is also an important issue, and it's a challenge, particularly with regard to the Sri Lankan issue. The case in Sri Lanka, it questions about the coordination that we have on this particular aspect of the relationship. But hopefully reflected in the way both countries reflected to the government response. I think perhaps that's an area that we need to work on and will remain. There are diverging interests in these particular issues. But on the point on the conditionality, I think there has been significant changes in the Japanese approach to ODA, particularly after the 2015 when they adopted a new charter, ODA charter. But still, of course, it takes some time in terms of bringing that into practice. Perhaps it's also an area that we need to work on with our Japanese partners. I'll stop here.
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. We'll have to do some workarounds on these issues, which is always the task of diplomacy across the board. Professor Sato, I think we already have a FTA with ASEAN, so we're not worried about our trade with ASEAN. It's the strategic context of a China-led RCEP, plus the failure to achieve the kind of safeguards and incentives which we actually wanted right up to the last minute. A combination of economic as well as strategic factors kept us away. I don't think that is an issue which is going to go away, because India is now progressing very much on the line of bilateral FTAs once more with countries where there is great complementarity. With Japan, there is great complementarity, but our trade has not grown despite the CEPA. So I think we both need to look at what's going wrong on either end, because as I said, it is really a major concern to the strategic partnership that our economic ties, both in trade and investment, are really headed in a not very good direction. So hopefully we can work that out. As far as infrastructure, ODA, and then working together in third countries, again, let's hope that that's a task of diplomatic coordination. And the more strategic that coordination is, the better it will be. And eventually, I hold firm, repeat my former point, that the nature of the strategic partnership between Japan and India will actually now once again start mirroring the nature of the India-United States relationship, because we had hoped that it would move away from actual dependence on the nature of India-US ties, but it's once again going to become a bit of a factor in those ties. So as far as I can see, there is absolutely no inclination on the part of either Washington or New Delhi to let their relationship slip, irrespective of what may be happening in Europe. So let me conclude there, and let me thank all three of you as speakers for bringing out a lot of information, a lot of breadth of ideas to our audiences. And thank you on behalf of ICWA for your joining this panel. I wish you a very good afternoon, Professor Sato. I hope to see you again online or in Tokyo whenever we are there next. Thank you for being there. Titli, you obviously put a lot of use to all your work on Japan, so great to hear from you. And Jojin, you're on the same track, so keep at it. All the very best. Thank you once again. God bless you. Bye bye for now.
With that, we're coming to the conclusion of the session 3 of the conference. I take this opportunity to thank Ambassador Singh for chairing the session, and my fellow panelists for contributing to the conversation, and also thank the audience for joining the conversation. And we will take a short 30 minutes break, and we will reconvene at 2 p.m. Indian Standard Time and 5:30 p.m. Japanese time. Thank you.